watching the seconds tick down.
That's right. Brady. Get your car fixed?
Huh?
Get your car fixed?
Yeah, it's done.
I worry about you, Brady.
Well, good morning, everyone.
You should.
I'd like to call the meeting to order for our Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting.
Wow.
Somebody.
I hear an echo. Today at 8:30, Tuesday, June 14th. And if everyone would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this morning, I am aware that we have an adjustment to the agenda. Commissioner Storley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This morning, Commissioner Sullivan and I will be attending the Gichigami Trail dedication and ribbon cutting. For those of you in the audience, during that time, we will have a pause with the board meeting, so there won't be any action taken while we're gone. We're hoping that it will be brief while we're there, but we don't know. There'll be dignitaries and people that will be making speeches, so we'll try to keep it at a minimum ourselves. So I would like to make a motion that during that time, 9:45 and on, that the board meeting will pause and resume again when we return.
And we anticipate that time to be approximately 11:15 for those that are following the live stream or need to return for items that are on the agenda.
Madam Chair, I will second the motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda? Anything I'm unaware of? All right. If not, we'll move on to our public comment period. And at this time, the public is welcome to address the county board on any matter of county concern. When invited to speak, please speak into the microphone for clarity. There is a place for you to sign in with your name and address. Members of the public may speak respectfully for up to 5 minutes, and the public comment period is limited to a total of 30 minutes. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak at this time? Please come forward.
Well, I have a question first.
Yes.
I had submitted a written email about what I want to talk about, and I was told that these public comments that were received through mail were going to be read, so I don't want to...
Yes, they will right after anyone else who would like to address the group.
Okay, so since I already submitted in writing and somebody's going to read it, I don't want to waste time by reading the same thing off my iPhone.
Okay, that's fine. I believe we all have comments that have been submitted that we will be reading. Thank you for asking. Are there any public comments? Anybody in the audience that would like to make a comment at this time? If not, we'll move on to any comments that have been submitted. Commissioner Yorkie, do you have any that have been submitted to you?
Commissioner, ooh, I've been promoted again. Ooh. Okay. I did receive one from Virginia Danfeld. She writes, "Dear Commissioners, having listened to the Planning Commission review of Paul Stucker's request for a CUP and Are we good? We'll just have to live with the echo, I guess. I'll start over. Dear Commissioners, having listened to the Planning Commission review of Paul Stucker's request for CUP in Hovland on June 8th, I recommend the following changes to the conditions of the permit. Condition number 9, change the number of allowed public events to 4 or 5 per year, which is what Mr. Stucker requested. Planning Commissioner Charles Laboda came up with a minimum of 12, 1 per month, which is more than twice requested. Since public events could be better done at Hovland Town Hall than in the R1 residential zone with less impact, the option does not need to allow for more. The public events portion of the request was the most objectionable to me. I would support the elimination of this option as well. I also strongly do not agree with the use of the term resort in the CUP. It is confusing with the technical term used in the zone resort commercial. I do not see that the ordinance identifies the difference. Even though I do not have an issue with the basic ideas of the Tamarack Land Cooperative, I think it would be reasonable to defer or make a condition of the CUP that more of the legal entity development of this cooperative be completed before conditional uses are permitted. Mr. Stuker allowed that many of the details were still a work in progress. However, if you deem it best to move along, I support the interim condition of the permit until the ownership changes or 5 years so that the conditions can be reviewed again. Respectfully, and thank you, Virginia Danfeld.
Are there other members of the board that have received comments? Commissioner Smuggles.
I have. Mine come from Kathleen and Robert Travis, 121 Arrowhead Trail in Hovland, to the Cook County Board of Commissioners. We are Kathleen and Robert Travis. This letter is in regard to the interim use permit granted by the Planning Board to the Tamarack Land Cooperative owned by Mr. Paul Stuker. As we stated in our letter to the Planning Board members, we have so many questions and red flags. These concerns were not addressed at the Planning Board meeting on June 8th. We submitted our letter of concern and had it in by June 1st as we were instructed. However, we were not aware that in order for our concerns to be discussed by the board, we had to verbally voice these concerns at the meeting. In order to do so, we would have had to sit at the table right next to Mr. Stuker and share the same microphone he was using. It felt very adversarial to me. Perhaps that was the intent. Why even have people submit their concerns in writing then? If the Planning Board has no intention of reading those letters and addressing the concerns therein, what's the point? We left the meeting with more questions than we went in with. Mr. Stuker seemed unable or unwilling to answer many of the questions that were posed to him. We are asking you to table a vote on approving this interim use permit until a more thorough discussion can take place. Once more of these questions are answered by the applicant. Thank you for consideration and your time.
Are there other commissioners that have received comments? Right, I have a couple of others. This is from Brea Meltzer, a North Road resident up in Hovland, to the commissioners. Cook County is home to lots of art. North House Art Colony with large expansions, several art galleries, art along the lake, the Grand Marais Art Fair, the Hovland Art Fair. The East End is home to many successful artists. Yet another arts-based destination seems redundant in this age of over-tourism. Tamarack's proposed campground, artist residency, VRBOs, and public events will demand more county resources and tax dollars, especially if it achieves nonprofit status. There is no benefit to the North Road neighborhood other than increased noise and traffic. I am personally offended by the applicant labeling his proposal a community asset. If Mr. Stuker truly feels a need to develop this land for the benefit of our community, there are more diverse options which would fit in with his admirable desire to retain the existing structures: additional permanent housing, long-term rental housing, housing for homeless citizens for which there is no local precedent. The Grover Concept Camp at the present Judge Magny Park provided housing for homeless men during the Depression. It was not a CCC camp. Cook County is not unique in facing the threat of over-tourism. Because of work, I have lived in many other so-called wild and scenic places. I've witnessed how local governments can make or break the communities they represent. I left the original hearing on June 8th because the applicant removed his mask to speak. Folks who attended told me some important questions regarding goals, operations, and business structure were either not answered or the answers seemed vague and ambiguous. Please overturn this ill-advised decision by the Planning Commission. Sincerely and with thanks, Rhea Meltzer. And the last comment I have comes from Ivy Hawking, a resident of Hovland. I'm asking for a more in-depth look at the Stuker CUP application. Point 1, the opposition viewpoint did not get a fair hearing. Oral comment cannot preclude written comments. Point 2, the Planning Board approval was premature when the property owner left so many unanswered questions and the business or financial structure is so unclear. Point 3, I appeal to your higher responsibility to sound economic ideas with positive impact to community and fiscal balance. And those are the comments I've received. Once again, any further public comments?
I'm sure I'm questioning whether our phone is our feedback.
I believe that might be the case.
It's not, it's not active.
Oh, okay.
But it does sound like it's,
It-
Yeah.
sorry.
Is somebody streaming on their laptop accidentally?
Anybody streaming? You just-
I'm not,
Let's try muting all of our devices.
Mine's muted.
mine is.
All right, with that, we'll close the public comment period, and I'd like to move on to our next item, which is the Juneteenth recognition. On June 19th, 1865, more than 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, enslaved Americans in Galveston, Texas, finally received word that they were free from bondage. It had taken Union forces until that day, about 2 years, to reach Texas in sufficient numbers to announce and enforce the federal order that ended slavery. Since that time, many Americans have observed and celebrated Juneteenth as Emancipation Day, a day of freedom. As stated when signed into federal law as our 11th and newest federal holiday back in 2021, Black Americans came to commemorate that day with celebrations across the country, building new lives and new traditions. And Juneteenth is a day that should be recognized by all Americans. When Juneteenth was made an official federal holiday, it took on a posture such as Labor Day, Memorial Day, or the 4th of July. And like other federal holidays, banks, schools, and government organizations, such as post offices, are expected to be closed. This year, Cook County begins to recognize this federal holiday, so our offices and buildings will be closed on Monday, June 20th, next Monday, in observance and recognition of Juneteenth. It's a day to educate ourselves and reflect. While slavery ended in 1865, racism persists within some individuals and institutions. Juneteenth lets use that day as a day to reflect on critical issues that perpetuate discrimination here and around the world. And now we'll move on to our consent agenda items. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Right, at this time, we'll move on to the Highway Department and Robbie Hass.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Now that we don't have an echo, I feel like we're missing something.
It turns out it was my monitor, and I turned it off completely, but there's got to be a way to mute it. I just don't have that control, so
I didn't know they had speakers.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy there's no echo, so that's fine. Let's see. First thing we're going to talk about, salt sand storage. You can look on there and see probably why we want to reject the bid. We dug into it a little bit more, and, who could have thought gas would be where it is right now when we had initially put this out for bid. On top of, the two line items that really stuck out, which is 99% of the structure, though, is, and it'll sound funny when I say it, but is the structure itself. That's proprietary from a company. And then additionally, the concrete pad. So when you look at the unit prices that we had initially figured they were versus what they came in at, that is obviously the largest discrepancy there. I think the pad was the biggest one. We had guessed, we had even raised our estimate, based on state we've talked about bids a lot in the past here. And so for the concrete in particular, we had started with state average, and then we actually raised it about 30%. And we thought that would be, kind of okay. Thorson's isn't doing concrete anymore. And so really anytime, if we need concrete up here, it's coming from Duluth or Virginia, very far. And so, you can see there, I think that between, where we would have to source the material, obviously fuel costs, and it was a late bid, to be fair. Ideally, that's why we'd like to rebid it in the fall. I think it would be, in the fall, if you remember, that's when we had put out the Cross River and Carlson Creek projects, and we got a number of people to bid on those projects, which was great. Gave us a great cross-section of, range in pricing, but still it made it very competitive versus this, we had one bidder. And so, my guess is if we do it in the fall, hopefully we get multiple bidders, and that hopefully would bring the price down. But, it's hard to predict. Maybe gas will be $8 and this is just what it is. So I guess I would recommend rejecting this bid and then allowing us to rebid it, this October, I think, or November, sometime in there. Any questions too, obviously, I'm here to answer them.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. Can you give us a little perspective on what this means as far as our salt sand storage needs and timing of, and with Mndot, and just how all those dynamics are working?
Absolutely, yeah. So I had reached out before we had brought this here. I immediately called Mndot because the biggest reason we're doing this is we have to move our pile. Our lease is up with them. And so, before we even began this process of trying to figure out a facility, they've been wonderful to work with and have been, very communicative as far as, if we run into issues, just let them know. We'll figure out something. So it's not this kind of hard, fast, get out of here type of thing. It's, a work in progress. And so we're actually trying to schedule a meeting to talk about that. So they're just fine to work with. I think if we really do need to move our pile, we'll just put it on our campus and do whatever environmental mitigation we need to do, on our campus to help facilitate that. So, yeah, we have a great partnership with them. That kind of leads into the next item we'll talk about late in a little bit here. But, yeah.
Thank you.
More to come.
Other questions for our highway engineer? If
Madam
not,
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to reject the bid for the salt sand storage
all right, and would you like
and
to?
rebid in the fall.
Thank you. All right, is there a second to that motion?
Support.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, on to our Mndot Master Partnership Agreement.
Flows perfectly into that. So we do this, I think it's every 3-5 years, somewhere in that vicinity, of the kind of a master partnership agreement with Mndot. And what that does is it allows us, on construction projects, a lot of times we'll ship samples down to the Duluth office for testing. They'll ask sometimes if they can use some of our sieves or something like that. It's kind of just this, it helps formalize a working relationship. And so another example, like I just brought up, is like the salt sand pile. And, say we need to move it and we need to move it ASAP, we could call Mndot and say, hey, can you bring a couple trucks up and help us move this? It'll help move things along faster. So it's just kind of the formalizing of an already great partnership, just in paperwork form, I guess. Yeah. Is there any questions with that, I guess?
Seeing or hearing none, is there a motion?
I don't have questions. I just want to thank you for formalizing it. It's really important to have that. It's great to have personal relationships, but to have the formal one, I think, is very responsible for our organization. So thank you. And I'll make the motion to approve that resolution.
All right, is there a second?
Sorry, and moving.
Everybody's like,
I'll support it.
all right, thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. So we have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Robbie.
Have a great day.
You too.
And now we have emergency management. So we have Mike Keyport and Elsa Lundy with us this morning. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, community members. As you can see, we have our Elsa Lundy, our Firewise Coordinator, with us this morning. If I could give you just a little background of our Firewise program, believe it or not, we've had a Firewise program in Cook County for going on 24 years. It's been building over the years. It falls under the emergency management jurisdiction, and the Firewise Coordinator is a contracted position. It's been quite a robust program. Todd Armbruster was our coordinator for quite a number of years, almost 6 years. He brought us up to a higher level. Elsa came on board a little over a year ago, and she stepped right up to the plate and is making great moves. We did run into a glitch when Elsa took the position and Todd left. Todd had a lot of information on his personal technology laptop. He used his own phone number for publications for the Firewise program, so that was the contact. So when Elsa took over, now Elsa's using her personal cell phone number and her own laptop. And we kind of struggled, Elsa and I, to get this information. There was a lot of files, there's a lot of mapping, there's a lot of contracts with the Firewise program. So it was a bit confusing and time-consuming, I guess, mostly for Elsa and myself. So we brought this forward to the Firewise Committee we've been discussing it at the Firewise Committee for the last few months. We brought this forward about using county equipment for the Firewise program, and it was approved at the Firewise Committee in May. So I'll start with the cell phone. We have a cell phone that was purchased by another department. It hasn't been used. This would give us a dedicated number for the Firewise program, so moving forward when we do publications for public outreach, we would have the same consistent number. If Elsa decides to leave the program, we'd still have the same phone number. You may know that the Firewise program is totally grant funded. We discussed this with Auditor Powers at our last Firewise meeting, and we can afford to make the monthly charge for the cell phone out of grant funding. That's the phone. The laptop, as I said, it was tough. Elsa was advised by our GIS analyst to not put all that mapping stuff on her personal computer, or she wouldn't have room for anything else. So for the same reason, we'd like a laptop for dedicated use to the Firewise program. What I would like to do with that is purchase that laptop out of emergency management budget. And my reasoning for that is grant funding can be it can be audited, and then it gets to the question, who owns this piece of equipment? If I buy it out of my budget, we know it's owned by emergency management. And, it's just a cleaner approach to this as I see it. MIS Director Rowan Watkins and Attorney Higgins have had some conversations, I'm not sure where that's at, about what this looks like for a contractor using county equipment, possibly a contract to be signed or something. I don't know where that's at right now, but that's what I have. Elsa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so regarding the phone, a part of using the grant funding is we do fuels reduction, and that has to have a pretty complex map for me to follow and for my contractors to follow to make sure that they're on property lines and they're not in wetlands and stuff like that. And so that mapping service I've been using on my phone and personally paying for, and we also want that to be on this Firewise phone, and that'll also make it so the next person can use the same system and it's easy to transfer over. The consistency of phone number, I have just bins of pamphlets that have incorrect contact information on them, and I'd like it to say Firewise Coordinator, here's a number, so that forever they can be used and prevent that from happening in the future. Also, having contacts and having the same number, I still get voicemails sent over from Todd from people calling him. So being able to have a consistent number and have contacts in there, so when I hand over the phone, it's not just a blank phone with no resources on it. Then with the laptop, as Mike said, having everything in one place so that it can be transferred over. And with compatibility, there was lots of files that I couldn't open because I don't have software on my personal computer for things like mapping and other things. So again, it's just so that we can transfer this position over and it can be smooth and information isn't lost, contacts aren't lost, things like that. So that is all I have.
Are there any questions or items to discuss? I think Commissioners Folleson and I can state from being on Firewise that we understand the challenges you've faced over the last year, just with communication and with all the data and the contracts, and so we really support this. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I assume there's been discussion about, or please fill me in, just about why this is a contracted position and where those lines get blurry as far as if we're providing equipment and, and how that works. I'm assuming it has something to do with the grant.
Maybe Brady can answer that question better than I can. He's been with the program longer.
No, there's nothing to do with grants. It just has to do with, I think, when it started, to have the least, let's say, levy involvement for the program. You know, the cost of benefits, et cetera, and so you leave it as a contract position. It's, and it's just continued that way for all these years. So that's a discussion for the board at some point, whether they want to upgrade that to a.
And I guess where I'm going with that is, I'd have concerns if we're putting ourselves in a legal liability with, you know, what's defined as a contracted position or what's an employee. And so I'm hoping that's been discussed or looked into, or HR has been involved, or see nods.
Yeah, it has, but I think it fits, I think it has fit. And I don't know anyone that's directing her work, her hour-to-hour work.
Sure.
She knows the parameters, and she follows the contracts. A lot of it is working with the Forest Service, and those, I mean, that was with the real impetus, which upgraded the position to what it is today, is those contracts for clearing those big landowners that are in conjunction with the forested areas out there. And the Forest Service used to do it themselves. They determined that that wasn't proper legally, and it should be done by the county for the landowners here. And when that transition happened, I think there was somebody just before Todd that was contracted for that, basically for that reason. And then Todd and now Elsa, so.
Thank you, and yeah, that seems like it's working fine, but I just, that thought came into mind when we start going down the road of providing equipment. And then also I just wanted to ask if things are moving more to the cloud-based platforms, and so it's not on devices, it's just on an account that can be transferred. Is that something you're talking with Rowan about, or?
We've talked at the Firewise meetings about that, yes. And I also have most of the files on a flash drive, and Mike has a copy of the flash drive. So, but yes, we would like to have a more updated system, just in case there was lost or damage or things like that.
Yeah, or down the road transfer.
Yes.
Yeah. If everything Todd had been in the cloud, then there would have been a smoother transition, even though I haven't heard anything bad about the transition. Thank you for your work.
Other questions or comments?
The only other point I wanted to make on this is by having this be county-owned equipment, then we can also sign on with our IT department as far as any upgrades or things like this, because it's a county-owned piece of computer equipment. And that was important to me, that for, you know, all the software or any other issues that we might have with the computer, that those were dealt with in a timely fashion, updated and kept because we have information important to the county that it's protected appropriately, this type of thing. So I think this was through our discussions, we landed there, had the discussions with Rowan, and it just seemed to be the right place when it all kind of came together for what we were trying to do and the important nature of the information and how we want to safeguard that for the county.
Yes, in speaking with the MIS department, Rowan is going to set up a service agreement, just like I have with my department, for both the phone and the laptop. So we'll have that on file.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about the $800 out of your budget. You have that in there, or is this going to put you over?
No, that won't put me over.
So you
no.
didn't need, do you know
Right.
how much is in there?
What's that?
What line item? Do you know how much you had budgeted for equipment and?
I don't off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I'm not concerned with it at all.
Okay, thank you.
Administrator, you're.
Well, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you, Elsa, for the work that you're doing. I think last summer really demonstrated how important this program is. Having a way for landowners to keep their properties and themselves safe is super important. Fortunately, this year is turning out to be a little wetter. I hope that continues, but even with that, I mean, fire is a persistent threat here. And so having this program in place is vitally important, and I'm grateful that both of you are doing this work. So thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to mention was in regard to having materials that can no longer be used because they have an outdated phone number on them. I just wanted to let the board know that I've been working with Todd Ford, our public information coordinator, to ensure that we don't do that anymore. Having evergreen information on pamphlets that we're intending to use for years to come is very important. We don't want to, throw them out at the end of each season. So that's something that we're focused on, and this fits in with that perfectly. We need to have contact information that goes from one employee to the next, so that we're not confronted with the situation of having to throw away lots of pamphlets and what have you. So that's all I have.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I just want to say again, thank you. We're very lucky to have you in this position, and just want to know that you're very much appreciated. As far as the outdated pamphlets are concerned, I guess it's probably covered by grant, but just in the name of conservation, I was wondering if, and I don't want to drive you nuts either, but if we can just put a sticker over the old number with the new number or something, that'd be extremely tedious, but depending on costs, maybe that's cost effective, just a suggestion.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I just would like to use not my personal phone number
Right.
again, so then it's
Yes.
just like sticker after sticker
Right,
after
right.
sticker.
Yeah.
But yes, I think that is a good solution instead
Okay.
of having to throw out bins
Okay.
of items. Yes.
Thank you.
Great discussion. All right, anything else? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Excuse me, I'll make the motion to approve the purchase of the laptop computer and use of county-owned mobile phone for the Firewise program.
Thank you, Commissioner Spallis, and is there support?
I'll support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. So we have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And at this time, we have Tim Nelson coming forward for land services.
And Madam Chair, while Tim is coming up, just wanted to mention the short-term rental committee that we were going to ask for your approval today in seating. We are going to table this, or request that you table it until the meeting on the 28th. And the reason for that is we got the applications in late last week, and we really didn't have sufficient time to review them and make well thought out decisions about who should be on that committee. We know that the community is paying a lot of attention to this, as they should be. It's a very important process. We want to make sure that we're getting it right, and we want to make sure that we take the time needed to get committee members who are going to represent the balance of perspectives that we talked about at the last meeting. So if it's okay with the board, we'd like to table that till next week.
That certainly makes sense. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to table the appointment of the Vacation Rental Review Committee.
All right, so
I will second.
thank you so much, Commissioner Swallison. We have a motion, we have support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Well, welcome Tim Nelson and Neva Maxwell. We have 3 items on our land services agenda to attend to this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first one is a conditional use permit request submitted by David Avery at 1471 County Road 14. This is a conditional use permit to allow a dog boarding facility kennel with a maximum of 10 dogs on the property, one which would be in-home for personal pet, and then 9 dogs boarded at the facility. Initially, Mr. Avery had an interim use permit that was for a specific period of time, which was submitted in 2019 to host 3 dogs, and he had a lot of success, and so he would like to expand that operation. Essentially, before they had a smaller facility for the 4 dogs, they're going to propose to use the garage, which is a larger space and further away from any other adjoining property owners. And there was no opposition submitted to the conditional use permit public comments. There was one person in favor of the hearing that submitted written comment beforehand, and then one person that was present during the public hearing that's also spoke in favor.
All right, thank you so much, Neva. Any discussion, any questions for Neva? I know one thing Commissioner Story, go ahead.
I like just the comment that he's using his garage for the future expansion so that it wouldn't bother the neighbors. I like that statement. Thanks for mentioning that.
And I was going to share that certainly having an opportunity to have a place where people can kennel their dogs has been something that's been discussed greatly throughout our community for a number of years. So it seems that it will be a service that will be utilized well, and it's nice that previously it has been such a success. Other comments or remarks? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the dog boarding facility kennel with a maximum of 10 dogs. Is there a second?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. The second item is the Peter and Amy James conditional use permit request, which would allow the conversion of the motel into long-term rental units. This is at the former Wedgwood Motel, and Mr. James had previously converted the 10-unit section of that motel into one bedroom unit and 2 2-bedroom units back in 2014. And so now him and his family are proposing to move off-site. They were living in the former office space and house of that building, and they'd like to convert that into 2 long-term rentals. And that's listed as a conditional use in that zoning district to have 2 to 4 family dwellings in a single structure.
Any questions or comments? Commissioner Swallison.
Clearly, it goes to a need for the community, and, I applaud that thought process to take that in being longer-term, rentals. When I reviewed this, I just saw benefits, I guess. I didn't come up with a lot of questions or anything that gave me concern.
Other comments or questions? Seeing or hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Swallison. We have a motion and support. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. And then the third item on the items for our department here is the Paul Stuker conditional use permit request. So obviously there's been a lot of discussion about this one. Overall, the request is to establish the Tamarack Land Cooperative on the property off of the North Road. And then they'd have artist retreats as kind of the second use. The third thing they would have is vacation rentals that would kind of fill in the occupancy when those first 2 uses aren't in in action and present. The fourth use was to have events at the site, kind of dovetailing on the artist residency, the idea being that once an artist residency has taken place, that artist could kind of test the waters by giving a little event to the community. And then the fifth part is to have some chickens on site. This was an after-the-fact request. The applicants kind of got the cart before the horse, but they did initiate contact with our office to get this permitting resolved. There was, about the vacation rental really briefly, vacation rental is a permitted use in this residential zone district, the R1 zoning district. So the conditional use permit doesn't require, we don't require the conditional use permit for vacation rental. So if this got denied, 2 structures on this property could still be used as a vacation rental if he went through our vacation rental permitting process guidelines as they are right now. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's caused a little bit of confusion. And that would just be standard with how we normally permit those. So as far as feedback that we received from the public comment period, we did receive mailings beforehand. So we received 9 comment letters before the deadline. So there was 4 opposed, 2 concerns, and 3 in support for written comments. And then I did receive 1 comment letter after the deadline that was not included in the Planning Commission packets. And then at the public hearing, there were people present to speak. There was 4 people that spoke in favor of the request at the public hearing. Nobody spoke during the public hearing opposed to the request. One of those people that did speak in favor, there's a little confusion. She read that letter that had gotten submitted late. So it's not that the letter itself was submitted into the record, it was her testimony reading that letter. So just wanted to clarify that point. And discussion covered many topics, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions. So happy to answer any questions you may have, and Tim's here to lend a hand.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Any questions that we have? Commissioner Svalas.
I've had calls and discussions with some of my constituents. It seems a lot of this, the questions and that were coming around revolved around the co-op model. Land use co-op just wasn't a familiar concept, I think, for many people. So that, and the thought was that didn't get very well resolved during the meeting. And it might be because I think even Mr. Stuker acknowledged that it's rather a hybrid, providing a place for people to come as well as, the short-term rental piece that you spoke of. It was kind of a hybrid model. I did note that it is registered with the state of Minnesota as a cooperative as of last year, with just a single agent or owner, Mr. Stuker, listed on that. So I think that's part of what we're dealing with, is just trying to get an idea of what is being put into the land use cooperative piece of it. I'm not looking for you to define that because that was already a difficult thing, unless you have a better understanding,
Yeah.
Please.
Go ahead, Tim.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Swellison, really, I think what the Planning Commission did was the appropriate move in modifying that from a conditional use to the interim use. So there was some confusion around that and some of the other things. Making it an interim use permit then puts a deadline on it. It will end and would have to, in order for it to perpetuate, it would have to come back in for review in any case. And so I think, that and some of the other issues that were brought up in terms of concerns about it is what motivated the Planning Commission to modify that to an interim use that does have a termination point to it.
Madam Chair, to that point, I was personally a little confused and might be just not fully understanding the model, because a cooperative generally has member owners is my mindset. Doesn't mean it's right, but that's my mindset. Currently is registered with Mr. Stuker. As he gets additional member owners, doesn't that challenge the need for re-permitting?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Swellison, what we look at with regards to the planning commission and the recommendation to the board, when we're reviewing something like this, is the actual use of the property, not necessarily the ownership triangle or however that's owned. So what the planning commission, and this is why it was a little bit confusing for the planning commission as well, is what they're looking at is the use. And that's why they wanted to really identify, okay, how many people can stay, what is the maximum number of people, and that they hit the 20, and that's it. Okay, does that mean there can be 20 vacation rentals? No, there can't. And so it's really, the time was spent identifying what the use is, and then, and that's why the discussion came towards a time limit for the interim use, that it has to be, it's no longer than a certain period of time, and then the ownership structure that was included in on that. So it will have to terminate and be re-reviewed at some point in time, but it's difficult for the planning commission. That's why we yield to the county attorney's office and other places in terms of the review of the actual ownership or the ownership structure. That's not really the planning commission's purview. The purview is the use of the property.
And I guess that was, I thought from my review, watching the meeting, I thought there was very good discussion on, all the different iterations of this to assure that total occupancy of the land, including the permanent residents that are there, 3, would be 20. And that helped you set your guidelines on septic and other things along the way. My question was really with condition number 8, IUP shall terminate upon transfer of ownership or within 5 years. Are we tying that specifically to Mr. Stuker? Because co-ops, by their very nature, the people that buy into them have ownership interest. And that's where I just was a little confused how we were going to adjudicate that as we moved forward, as new members came on with ownership interest.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Swallowson, and Molly, please jump in as you can. But yeah, the intent was to go ahead and review it. Okay, so he owns it as the sole owner of the cooperative. Yep. If it was going to blossom, and that was, the kind of, he did indicate that there's still a work in progress in this and that. If
Yep.
it was going to be converted into other members and this and that, that's when indeed it would have to be, at least that's the understanding that I had, that it would have to be reviewed again if that ownership structure did change. And County Attorney, am I understanding that point correctly?
Madam Chair. So, in my review of this issue, the entity which is contemplated eventually to be created as a cooperative is not really a cooperative until it's registered under the state of Minnesota laws. In fact, it's if you are not to call yourself a cooperative or to operate as a cooperative until you're registered that way. But again, is that really within the scope of the Planning Commission or this body when
They
you're
are
under?
registered.
Well, they
Yeah.
are now.
Yeah,
Okay.
They were
as of last July.
Yes, last July they were registered as a cooperative with the state of Minnesota under Minnesota Statute 308 Alpha.
Well, that's great. When I did that search, I must have spelled it wrong.
Yeah,
Because I did the search
And I
last-
apologize for
yeah.
interrupting. I
No,
just
that's
thought
okay.
that's a key piece of it to me too,
Key.
was that they are registered, because I knew you also couldn't utilize the term co-op
Yes.
unless you were formally registered, so.
Yes, that is key. Well, I would say our concern should be who is held accountable for abiding by the conditions of the CUP should you grant it. So if that entity or individual has been identified and you have a fair amount of confidence that they will follow through with the conditions, then the ownership model doesn't need to be a concern at this point. The way that they've set it, that the Planning Commission has set it up for it to terminate if ownership changes, is that correct?
Or after 5 years.
Or 5 years.
Or after 5 years. I mean, I think that makes sense too, because of the kind of fluid nature of this idea and this project at this point. And so I think that makes sense legally and practically. Does that help answer the question?
I think it does, and in my mind, I guess I'm going to start to refer to Mr. Stuker as the co-op agent, is probably better stated, and that way we'll stay out of that space, at least for now. But thank you, that's helpful. My next question did go to, you stated and correctly in my mind, that short-term rentals fit within the R1 model, and that was fine. The only question that came from some constituents was, there's a number of buildings, would we be permitting specific buildings for use in our permitting? You stated 2, and that was what, that question came up, would we be specific to different buildings there?
Yes, yeah. So I spoke with Joseph Ruth in our office. He's our staff person that processes vacation rental licensing, and discussed this application with him, just to confirm that I was addressing that correctly. So 2 structures can receive vacation rental licenses, 2 specific structures. It's not just any 2 of the 3. And so with that, the barn house has potential for occupancy of 8 people. There's 4 bedrooms in there. And then they've got a little structure called the tea house that really is adequate for 1 person, maybe 2. There is no plumbing in that structure, so that structure wouldn't be able to get the Minnesota Health Department lodging license. And then the yurt also, that's where Mr. Stuker lives, so that wouldn't really make sense to rent out, but that also doesn't have pressurized plumbing, so that also wouldn't be eligible to get the Minnesota Health Department license. But ideally, you know, if they just went away with the conditional use permit and didn't proceed with that, they could legally, you know, apply to get that vacation rental license for the barn house and the tea house, or the yurt, any of those, 2 of those 3.
I have other questions, but I'll let others.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
There was a question that came up about, did we review the current structures to ensure they met proper standoffs from, like, the river frontage, that type of thing?
We haven't checked, so there's no requirement that a structure be what's called a conforming structure to be meeting those setback standards, so I did not evaluate that in my request. I don't know that that would have been a significant topic. I think the tea house probably is within setbacks, now that I think about it. It's quite close to the bluff of the river there. So if there was specific concerns about that, that could have been discussed.
That was the building that was being questioned, I think.
Okay, yeah, it's really close to the bluff there, so it's quite likely not conforming, but it's what we consider grandfathered conforming, that it was put in place before zoning.
And with this being a cooperative, I guess it's a commercial enterprise of such, is that still okay to have within the R1 zoning requirements?
Ultimately, that's what this whole process is for,
Right.
tongue in cheek,
My
but
thought was too. That's why
yeah.
It isn't clearly defined, so therefore that's why it's coming in and being reviewed through the planning commission.
Correct. So the reason this is even eligible to be considered is because our zoning ordinance has that catch-all phrase, that any use not expressly identified as a permitted or conditional use in a zoning district may, at the county's discretion, be considered for a conditional or an interim use permit. So there's kind of a higher degree, a higher threshold on the applicant's part to show that that use is compatible with that zoning district, and that's why we're having this robust conversation.
And that was that catch-all one we were going to review as we review those processes going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's it.
All right. Other commissioners? Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you. I have some concerns with this one. So I'm going to start with the terminology of cooperative and proposed membership and fee structure does not change the fact that this property will be primarily used by other people visiting the area, not living here year-round. And I get, according to our current zoning, Mr. Stuker is allowed to have 2 vacation rentals. He gets to do that regardless of this board. My concern is number 3 in the project details says vacation rental. Short-term vacation rentals would be open to the public when the spaces are not being occupied by cooperative members or artist residencies. Additionally, tent sites may be located in the developed area's tree line. That makes it sound to me like we're saying he can use, if there's no members using those 20 sites or 20 beds, he gets to use it as a vacation rental. To me, that's a resort, just like some other resorts in our community. So, thank you. Can you respond to that?
I can, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hawkins, there is just an inherent maximum of 2, and I know that that was a major consideration or a major part of the discussion with regards to the Planning Commission is, we're going to open up all the 10 sites, we're going to open up all these different sites. If none of the players are used, you're going to use 20. There's going to be 20 vacation rentals on there. No, there can only be 2 vacation rental units, and that's it. That's per our ordinance. That exists, that's inherent. If this conditional use doesn't pass, like as this board has already indicated, they can do the vacation rentals anyway, regardless of whether it's passed or not passed. If this is passed, they still have to adhere to the vacation rental ordinance, which has a maximum of 2 vacation rentals, period, on the property. Now, the property could be subdivided into many parcels in the R1 district. It could be subdivided into several, have 2 dwellings on each, and each dwelling, or to each lot could have 2 vacation rentals. So you could have multiple, dozens of vacation rentals on the property inherently as its zone district is right now. Currently, as it sits as the 1 parcel, it can only have 2, period.
Yeah, I understand that. Or
Okay.
it could be subdivided and
Yes.
maybe it could be sold for 20 year-round residents. That would be the goal, since we know that's what we need more. My next questions come here. Sorry, I'm reading my notes. So will these rentals, even the artist residents that are not part of the membership, they are 14 days or less, will those rentals be subject to our lodging tax?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hawkins, that's a great question for Auditor Powers.
Could you repeat?
Sorry, I just came up with it last night. I
Well,
didn't give you a
please.
heads up.
Well, I was reading back on the previous question. Could you repeat that question?
Okay, so according to the plan that was presented to us, we have membership residents, we have artist residents. The artist residents, according to the plan, are less than 14-day stays, which makes me think they would fall under our rental ordinance, or I mean, our vacation rental. Would they
Less
be
than 30
subject
days.
to lodging tax?
Less than 30
collection?
days, yes.
Has that been made apparent to Mr. Stuker? Is this part of the conditions?
And I did not include that in my land use analysis, no.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not part of their,
right. I just wanted to
agenda.
clarify what our expectations as a county would be. My next concern is with the public events that are proposed. It's suggested to have 1 event per month of up to 80 people. Who's in charge of making sure that 81 people don't come to the site? How are we just going to have public call our sheriff's department to say, I think there's too many people there? How does that work?
Go ahead.
Commissioner, or Madam Chair, Commissioner Hawkins, it's like any of the enforcement that we have. I mean, we wish we would have a far greater enforcement team that we have, because there are a lot of requests out there. There are a lot of conditional or interim use permits that have been granted out there that have occupancy limitations or what. No, we don't go peep in windows, and we don't do counts at the gate. We don't have the staff or personnel to do that. We do rely, and this is where we do get the predominant amount of information for doing any kind of enforcement activity, is community observation. So if it is indeed is an event that is limited to 80 and you get somebody concerned in the area that's, oh, there's 120 people or whatever the case may be, they would phone law enforcement or us. And frankly, during the day, it can be us. During the evening hours, it would have to be the law enforcement to go out and evaluate that. And that's, if any violation of that is grounds for revocation of the permit. So yes, there is an enforcement mechanism in place. And we would rely predominantly, since we don't send roving staff out to observe these things, we would rely on the observation of the community.
Thank you.
And we get a lot of that input.
Yeah, I'm just gonna state, I have concerns with the way this is currently proposed. I applaud Mr. Stuker. I'm glad to see that he wants to improve the land and restore those buildings. I think it's I was very happy to see that when I drove by a while back, that there is some activity there. Not sure this is the right activity for this residential district. So I just don't, I wrote down here, so I had it in, what am I disagreeing with? I do not believe the proposed use of this parcel to be consistent with a desirable pattern of development in the area as it is currently presented, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Huggins. Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. I'm looking at this overall project, and I don't know if Neva can respond to it because I do have some individual concerns, and I do say that the two commissioners have spoken highly of some of the things that I'm concerned about, too. One of the things is that I understand that they are using a neighbor's well, which is bad water, but they're using osmosis to make it good water. How long is that going to last? Water is really important. So I'm concerned about that. Chickens, well, I suppose people are having chickens within the city limits, so I guess chickens are okay out in a rural area, but that's another topic. And I am concerned about the events. A lot of the events, could be something that the public would be invited to, something that this cooperative people would be doing. It's all nebulous out there. I don't know where they're going to go with this. There's a wonderful Hovland Town Hall events could be held in with ample parking, so I'm concerned about events. I don't understand where Mr. Stuker is coming from or who's supporting him. I think there's some thing in the background there that we don't know about. There's a proposed chapel use. Is this going to be a religious conclave? Is this going to be something that's promoting, something along that? And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying, interesting use of that. And having all these people there, they're probably going to need a commercial kitchen, and I don't see anything in there about that. So this is my overall opinion. I'm not real comfortable with this right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. Other comments or remarks? Commissioner Solison.
I know, Neva, when you first met with Mr. Stuker and reviewed this, you were trying to find what would be comparable or something that we could understand possibly to help us, the public, and the Planning Commission and our commission. So you had called out and just stated that it's somewhat like a resort, right, for our own benefit. And to me, I guess the thing, to some of the previous questions as far as the people and how things are done through taxing and other things, the resort model is well understood. And we've got a section 6.06 for standards and what we expect to be done throughout that process. I think that's where I'm a little uncomfortable because we don't have something that's clearly defined out there that says, do we meet these following things? And so that's where I struggle a little bit, right? Because I like structure. I like to be able to look and say, meets this, yes, meets this, no, And so that's where this one gets a little bit unsettling to make a decision. Are we in the right spot on the land use? There's these other things like the taxing and all these other stuff that I'm sure Brady and others will review, and Bob will have to make a decision on how this is, how this is being classified, whether it's commercial, whether it's residential, whatever it might happen to be, from that taxing perspective. But just in the land use, I was trying to get a little better, and I'd be happy to use the resort one, but then through the discussions in the planning committee, it's like, all right, let's stop using the resort one. I'm like, wait. I know what to do with that. So I guess that's where I'm struggling a little bit. I'm not asking you to answer that because I don't know. I mean, the planning commission has reviewed it, they've made their decision, and I'm just, other than, is it the proper thing to be utilized for that neighborhood, this type of thing, I don't know what standard to apply, other than I still have questions.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I certainly appreciate all these questions and all these concerns because they are in my mind as well, and clearly in the public's mind. It's very unique, clearly. I do believe we'll see more of this, either structure or type of thing, because how land prices are. Who's going to buy that property and what are they going to do with it? One individual, how much money do they need in order to do anything with it? How do you get that financing? So a cooperative model, I think, is going to be happening more and more. So we need to better understand that and get a better grip of that. And just the impacts that can have in the neighborhood, that's clearly a concern too. I do really like that it's suggested as an interim use permit. I think, again, how best to navigate this is step by step in trials. I don't see cutting up the property into multiple parcels would be popular in the neighborhood either, and so it's a tricky situation. Darned if you do, darned if you don't. I guess I would like a little more clarity on the events numbers. When a request is made and then it's increased by the planning commission, I just that makes me uncomfortable, but that's their prerogative, I guess. So if you could give some insight there.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Mills. The reason why, and this again is my impression in observing the Planning Commission, is the events were talked about a lot, and the applicant did state that most of the large events and such were going to, he found, using the town hall much more favorable with parking and everything else, and indicated that that's where they would mostly be used, and that he indicated that the events that would be held at the property would be 10, 20 people, would be smaller events, and the larger events would be at the town hall, and that's what gave the Planning Commission the level of comfort to say that. Why they moved the number to one a month, I don't know. I think they did so based off of that comfort feeling with the smaller number events being actually on the property, and the fact that the property is as big as it is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I have some similar thoughts to all the other commissioners. And I think part of the challenge for the public to understand and for all of us to understand is there are a lot of unknowns. The term was used by Mr. Stuker in the meeting, a hybrid cooperative, where it combines housing and kind of a consumer piece. And I think that wasn't clarified. In looking up what is a cooperative, it's an organization that has articles of incorporation and bylaws, and Mr. Stuker talked about that he has a steering committee, kind of like a board of directors, but there wasn't any document that was shared with the public, and that might be of concern and might have clarified some of the questions that have come up. There was a comment made that there is an existing precedent with galleries in the woods, and I want to make it clear that our decision is not based on any precedent. There's not a precedent. We look at each property individually. So I think that's important to remember as well. I like the idea that the Planning Commission came up with an interim use permit. I think if this were to go forward, it's something that needs to be looked at carefully. But my recommendation would be to look at what the applicant requested, which was 5 events, 75 people maximum for each of those. And I would be much more comfortable with an interim use permit that's 5 events and 75 people, if we were to move forward with this. Any reactions? Administrator York.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about the interim use permit, because this is the second time in the last year or so, the last one being the dog kennels out on County Road 14. And I'm just wondering what goes into determining the time period of the interim use? Is there a minimum period that is selected, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Administrator Yorkie. The interim use, which actually we didn't have for the longest time, the cities in their statutory authorization, it had the interim use permit for a long time. We only had the conditional use permit, and we kind of maybe overextended in the way past our ability to put a time limit or a time thing on a conditional use. Statutorily, that doesn't exist. When a conditional use permit is granted, it runs with the property so long as the conditions in the permit are adhered to and maintained. The interim use permit is one that provides a lot of flexibility both to the applicant and to the board to be able to determine, however they want to determine it, what that time period could be. We have interim use permits that are out there that are good for a year, and then they'll be reviewed after another year, just depending on, again, its concern for its use. Some of the considerations that are taken into effect is how much does it change the character of the locality, and how much, on the other side, how much infrastructure is needed, how much investment is needed, and you don't want somebody to have to put out a lot of investment for a one-year period and a lot of uncertainty. And they try to look for that balance, and there really is no expressed formula within the statute. It provides the total flexibility to the Board of Commissioners to determine what length of time. There just has to be some express specific point in time, either transfer of property or a time period, or, as in this case, a combination of the both.
Was there any discussion by the Planning Commission to consider a shorter term than 5 years?
There was some discussion. I can't remember if any actual numbers have been thrown out, or 3 or whatever, but we do, there's examples, as I indicated, in our county that are 1 to 3 years to 5 years. I don't believe we have any interim use permits that are over 5 years. Once they get to 5 years and over, then they go pretty much at the point of sale or transfer of property. So it certainly is within the purview of the board to examine a briefer time period. If you wanted to go 3 years, that's within your purview to do. That was just the recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I'd like to take a stab at a motion. I've been thinking about this. So I'd like to move that we authorize an interim use permit for 2 years, 5 events a year, 75 people, as was in the original request.
I'll support, Madam Chair.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just acknowledging that the rest of the conditions that were recommended.
And all the other conditions would stand, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
And a further discussion question. Considering the applicant's vision of smaller events being there, 20, I wonder why we wouldn't have that as the number and have the larger events at the town hall. Thoughts, concerns? I am concerned about light pollution, noise pollution, just impacts on environment, neighborhood, and I think having this shorter time frame with a toned down, a smaller number would be a good step to try it. I do want to encourage this trial. I do applaud the creativity at trying to make something work, but I do want to respect the neighborhood as well. So
how would we redo that condition?
I guess just amending your motion to, instead of 75, say 20.
With a maximum of 20?
Yeah.
With a maximum of 20 and additional events to be held at the town hall.
Well, that's not part of
Or-
the
yeah.
permit, but, and I don't know if that just clamps down too hard, but that's, you know, talking about some of the concerns that we have and that the public has.
So if I understand what you're saying, the 5 events, no more than 20
20
people, and
people.
you're applying that to the property. If they want to have larger events or they want to have more events, this is just applying to their property, the 5 and 20.
Correct.
Anything beyond that, if they want to have more events, they can have them at the town hall, and they can have however many people would fit in the town hall. That's your point. Okay, I understand.
Does it make sense,
That's a-
or do you have
that's a-
concerns?
No, I get it. I was just trying to get a thought in my mind of how this was, you know, what we were doing.
I mean, that being said, Madam Chair, that being said, if I throw a party at my house, I'm, you know, I'd like to have more than 20 people there. So that's where it's, you know, I'm trying to weigh, like, what's an event? You know, how does that all fit in? I don't want to clamp down too hard, but I don't want to have too great an impact on the neighborhood. Property rights and all that too, so.
Eva.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Mills, I wanted to double check I understand correctly, because the occupancy limit is set at 20 people. So
Right.
would this be 20 people attending an event in addition to the 20 people staying on site? Or would it be, hey, we're having an event, everybody's staying over, you got to skedaddle for a while?
Right.
So how would that look?
Right, and that's a very good point and a very good question, and I was not thinking 20 additional, and I can see the problem right there. That's why I was hoping for a little more discussion about that, but 75 seems like a larger impact, so.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Commissioner Mills' point, and to Neva's, in clarification, we have that maximum occupancy set at the 20. If you reduce the number of the event load from 75, you're still kind of cutting in half if you say 40. That would take into consideration those that would be staying there, because only the 20 are overnight occupancy, and then you would still be cutting down that 75 by half, pretty much.
And that was my understanding of your amendment.
Now I
So
better
that it would
understand,
be 20 who can stay there plus an additional 20, so maximum of 40 for the event. All right. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second this.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So for clarification, we have that amendment in there for the maximum 40,
Correct.
including the 20 that are staying.
5
Absolutely.
events.
5 events.
5
2-year
events, 2-year IUP. And 2-year or upon transfer,
With all of the other conditions still
all
in.
the other conditions.
I saw you moving.
And Madam Chair, if I
Thank
may,
you.
there is, you know, we have these concerns, and the public has brought these concerns. There is also significant public support, I want to point out.
Correct.
And so I don't want to dismiss that. It's
Right.
just that we're trying to be conservative in how changes are done in the neighborhood and how property is used. So I do appreciate all of the public input, but I think taking these smaller steps is a safer approach.
Absolutely.
Right, and to that point, it provides the opportunity in that 2-year period to better understand and put together the business model and how it's going to work and what works for that facility. And then, when it comes back to review it, it might actually meet that threshold that we could feel comfortable and go with a CUP, you know, which would be the goal. So, okay.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second.
Uh,
All in,
Madam Chair, can I clarify who made the motion in the second?
I made the motion.
And I
I
heard
second.
Dave at one
Dave
point.
made the second.
Okay.
Well, actually,
Or-
she made
And then I
it
heard
No,
Jamie.
Thank you.
on the amendment.
No, you made the original motion.
Right.
Commissioner Mills
Made the amendment.
made the amendment. So did you get the first and the second on the original motion?
So that's where I want to
I
make
made the
sure we're clear.
motion. Commissioner Mills provided the amendment, which I agreed to, and Commissioner Storley seconded.
seconded the amendment.
Amendment.
I seconded the original motion.
Okay.
Ducks
There we
in
go.
a row.
Perfectly clear.
And I apologize for my alarm going off. That was so that Commissioner Storley and I could leave for our event, our ribbon cutting.
Would you like to go for a vote before you leave?
We are going to go for a vote before we leave. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So at this point in time, it is 9:49. We're going to adjourn. And Commissioner Storley and I will run up for the ribbon cutting at Gichigami Trail, and we hope to be back in or around 11:15. Thank you all very much. We go into recess.
Because I pulled into a parking spot and I'm like, yeah. She's like, you can actually drive.
Gets me. All right, well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to our meeting. We have been in recess for about the last hour and 15 minutes. And Commissioner Storley and I just wanted to share a little bit about our experience out at Gichigami Bike Trail. And so Ms. Zimmer has a little video that she's going to show. All right. There we go. We didn't create a video of all the speeches and whatever, but it clearly was a wonderful collaboration and a great celebration for the official opening of the Gichigami Trail, and just lots of Cook County residents. There were people on bikes. They made e-bikes available for those that drove there and still wanted to experience the trail. And if you haven't been out there, anyone in our community, I want to encourage you to go. It was a beautiful experience. The event, we are starting before 11:15 because the event was rather short. It was a little bit cool out there with that 20-mile-an-hour wind coming in off the east over the big lake. But it certainly did keep the black flies at bay, and Jenny and I appreciate that greatly. So, right, Commissioner Storley? All right, well, just wanted to share that moment with you.
And since there's heat warnings throughout the rest of the state, we can just be pleased that we have to put on a jacket.
Absolutely. We had representatives from the DNR who came from St. Paul, and we're very pleased that they had to be here in Cook County today. Very appreciative of that.
Madam Chair, I have to ask Commissioner Storley, were you able to keep the large scissors? Those are pretty impressive.
I was not able to keep them, no,
No,
but it was
darn it.
it was a handful. So when they said, take one hand and put it on the ribbon, and I said to the guy next to me, hold it really tight because I can't do both.
That's right.
But I appreciate being able to go. I've been on the Gichigami Trail Association for the last 8 years and many years before that to see different segments being done, and now I'm working on the Tofte and Lutzen one, and if the legislature would cooperate, we'd be further ahead, but that's okay. We'll just take it as it comes. So it was a good privilege to be there.
Absolutely. Well, we'll continue in our agenda with item number 8 from the Assessor's Office, Bob Thompson. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The first thing I have on the agenda today is an abatement for the Gunflint Trail Historical Society. They purchased a residential structure to house employees. We are applying for they applied for the abatement because they had a mid-year application last year. We reached out to the Department of Revenue, and there was some communication back and forth trying to determine if this use would meet the eligibility for exemption from property tax, and ultimately we landed on and decided that it met the requirements for the exemption. So we have an abatement for application. The financial impact for the 22 payable is $2,796.
All right. Any questions or concerns for Auditor Thompson? Or Assessor Thompson, excuse me. If not,
I'm
Commissioner Hawkins.
curious. Sorry, it just popped into my head. So how long have they had this property?
They actually closed, I believe, in, it was like June 30th of '21. So if you acquire a property before July 1st, I believe is the date, and it's used for a exempt purpose, they can apply for the exemption for the 21 assessment, which is payable in 22. So essentially, a taxable property becomes exempt if they're acquired by an exempt entity. And then, you know, it's not always cut and dry whether or not the use meets the definition for the exemption. Housing is something that typically we don't approve an exemption on. However, with the Historical Society, they were able to show that their hours would have been reduced. We also verified that the tenants staying in the property are not working for any other organizations up the trail. So it's, you know, it's not like a benefit to them. It's part of the only way that the Historical Society was able to get employees and keep their hours.
Do you know how many employees there?
That
Wasn't in that building?
I didn't confirm how many are staying in there. It is, it's not a small house. If anyone's familiar with the Tuscarora Lodge on Round Lake, it's that house that the previous owners used to live in there. The current owners are staying in one of the lakeside units. I believe.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to approve the Gunflint Trail Historical Society's abatement request.
Thank you, Commissioner Spallison. Is there support?
Strongly support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion?
I'm
Commissioner
sorry.
Hawkins.
One more question.
Sure.
So if the use of this building changes to not be employee housing, does that take away the abatement?
It potentially would. Yeah, if some of the facts that are currently in place change, it could lose the exemption. Exempt organizations have to reapply every 3 years. 2022 is one of the reapplication years, so actually every exempt property in the county, other than state, county, or city property, has to reapply, or federal property. They only have to apply one time for those. So if there was a reapplication or a lack of a reapplication, they would lose the exemption if there were some changes to the circumstances.
Yeah, I
Commissioner
guess-
Mills, if you have questions.
That's fine.
Okay. Just want to appreciate you digging into this and, you know, really, really analyzing whether or not it's appropriate.
Yep.
Other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I gave you a motion.
Oh, yeah.
and it was
Oh, that's
seconded.
right, thank you, we were in
Not a
discussion. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. So now we have some information to share, just an update on our County Board of Appeals and Equalization.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So I had reached out to Administrator Yorkie about adding some additional time for our County Board of Appeal and Equalization. Ever since I've been here, we've always done it in a 1-hour meeting that extends to 7 p.m. We typically have always required appointments, and we have had walk-ins to those meetings, and we try and deal with them if we can. This year, we have obviously had a lot of appeals based on the market increases that the residents and property owners in Cook County saw for 2022. Currently, we had about 530 calls total. We're still getting them. Every Monday, it seems like there's another little surge. And also, we had some public notices in the paper about the Board of Appeals, so we got some calls yesterday. We have 52 open appeals listed on our spreadsheet. We have 4 appointments scheduled. We have a lot of taxpayers who have appealed that either are not responding to our emails, or they were appeals that were seen before the local Board of Appeals. In fact, of the 52, 22 of those went to the local boards and either had no reduction or had less than a reduction than they were looking for. So we may be able to resolve, a number of I don't anticipate we'll have 52 appeals to go through during our boards. Last week, we resolved over 70 appeals that were active. So, of 530, we're down to 52. I anticipate that will continue to go down. We're working on resolving some, and the other ones, we're just preparing our information. Most of the ones that went to the local boards, we had packets of information prepared, so we're already prepared on those. And aside from that, I did attach just some best practices that I wanted to go over. Another thing that I think I was hoping that the board would give me some guidance on, time limits for appeals. We are requesting appointments, and we do have some written comments. So I will be sending the written comments and my information on those to you as probably early next week. And if I continue to get more, I'll send it over for you to review ahead of the meeting. And then I anticipate we will address these during the meeting and motion on the information that's been submitted in writing. And for the people who do want to come and present their information, the Department of Revenue recommends 3 to 5 minutes for the taxpayers to present their information. and then typically 3 to 5 minutes for the assessor to rebuttal, and if we said, 3 to 5 minutes for the board to deliberate. We would be either looking at 10 minutes for each appointment or, 12 minutes for each appointment. So 10 or 15 minutes we'd probably schedule. And I'm not sure how the board would prefer to go. We also, in some cases, have taxpayers appealing multiple properties. So, maybe we say 3-minute time frame for a single parcel appeal or 15 minutes for a multiple parcel appeal. That would kind of fall into the Department of Revenue's guidance on the time frames, but certainly I would listen to whatever the board wants to proceed with.
All right. Well, as we think about that, Commissioner Storley, you have probably the greatest experience with this process, and do you have any recommendations based on time and scheduling?
I agree with Bob that up to 5 minutes. It depends on, I'd look over the room to see how many were there. A lot of times, we came in cold. We didn't have anything ahead of time, which was unfortunate. But reasonable for an individual 5 minutes, and then up to 15. I think we kind of, we just took the temperature of the room at that moment. So it seemed like if there was, we never really stayed. I think, Brady, there was one time we stayed maybe till 8 o'clock, but we did stay beyond the 7.
Mhm.
Yeah, not very often, but I think this process is great because we're coming in extra time in order to meet with the folks ahead of time. So maybe by our 6 o'clock meeting on the 23rd, we won't have too many.
Yeah, that's my hope. Setting these appointments, I think we have 1 to 5 o'clock available, and then again from 6 to 7. We're currently trying to fill those time slots before we start booking anything on Friday. The Friday meeting is published publicly, so I think that just for best practice, we would recess on Thursday evening and reconvene on Friday just to satisfy the public notice that there was a meeting held. If we didn't have any walk-ins, we could just adjourn. The only statutory requirement is that we do not close out our meeting before 7 p.m. And as long as we offer appointments up to 7 p.m. and beyond, we can require appointments to the meeting. So it's going to be a lot more organized than, not knowing who may show up in a 1-hour window and potentially having a room full of frustrated people fueling off of each other about their property valuations. We'll have one-on-one appointments with the board. I think it'll be much more organized and much more orderly. And I've heard from taxpayers saying that they appreciate the one-on-one. So, they feel like they'll be able to get their point across and be heard. So, yeah.
Administrator York.
I just want to publicly thank Bob and his staff, Rachel Espy, Andrew Beavers, and Kyle Monson. These folks have been working so hard since the valuation notices came out. Bob, you said 532?
530 roughly.
Okay, 530 appeals or inquiries, and they've been working diligently to respond to every one of those. And being the assessor is not an easy job, especially when valuation notices come out and folks have concerns about their values, and there's still a lot of confusion about the relationship or non-relationship between property valuations and tax bills. The taxes are assessed based on the levy that this board sets in December every year. Valuations are a factor in what somebody's tax bill will ultimately be, but just because your tax bill goes up or your valuation goes up 50% doesn't mean your tax bill is going up 50%. So there's been a lot of consternation about that, a lot of upset folks. But Bob and his team have really handled things effectively. They've been very responsive and very professional, and I'm really grateful for your work. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Administrator Yorkie. We definitely have been doing our best to, if not provide explanation to taxpayers with concerns, We have made adjustments down when we see that they're necessary, and we've advised taxpayers when we feel like an adjustment down isn't necessary, and we try and educate and let them know that, I heard from a number of taxpayers and even some supervisors in the West End, town supervisors, that they were under the impression that these increased property values meant that more revenue would be collected, and that's not the case at all. The only change or increase in revenues collected is when the board sets that levy in September.
Other questions, remarks? Commissioner Mills.
I don't have a question, but I want to reiterate just how grateful I am for the work that you've done. 530 down to 70, down to 50 is just incredible, and all your staff. So, and knowing you and how you explain things, you do an excellent job, and you're very systematic, very linear, and can break it down for people to understand. And I've heard good feedback along those lines too. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner Mills. Yeah, we do our best. I know there have been some people that are not happy with, the result of their appeal, and I've had some people. I've had one email me particularly on a day that was pretty rough. It might have been a Monday, but I had an email that said, thanks for your explanation and the kind comments. And there's always two sides to every appeal, and we do our best to get the values where they should be to create equity.
Well, and that being said, you are helping our community not having to pay the state to do this too, and you're on top of it, and you're knocking it out of the park. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well done.
So as we think about this time frame, in my head, I'm thinking every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. How are you feeling based on the concerns that you're hearing from citizens, the kinds of remarks they have? What do you think would be most appropriate?
I think that, that how I mentioned a little bit earlier, if they have multiple parcels, maybe give them the 5-minute appeal. So that appeal appointment would be 15 minutes. It'd be 5 minutes for them, 5 minutes for me, and 5 minutes for the board. And if it's just a single parcel, we go to a 3-minute or which would be a 10-minute appointment. 3 minutes for them, 3 minutes for me, and 4 minutes for the board. And we may get ahead of schedule, but hopefully we won't fall too far behind schedule. I'm going to do my best to schedule the appointments in a way where we can stagger it with written comments in between. If we get ahead of schedule, we can go through some of the written appeals. So that's really, I feel like that would be enough to process the appeals and give a fair appointment.
It seems to be really reasonable that we would do that 10-minute or 15-minute, and I like the idea of the written comments in between. Gives us a little cushion.
And Madam Chair, I would be less than comfortable doing less than 5 minutes for the public, but I am very comfortable giving Bob only 3 minutes and us 3 minutes to deliberate. I think we'll be able to have enough conversation and enough explanation just to suss things out there. But I really want the public to have an ample time to make their case, because, Bob does this every year, but the public generally doesn't have much experience, and so there'll be a little extra time needed, I think, so.
All right.
So if we modify the time blocks, what we need to do is we need to create appointment slots for people to take. And so if we modify the residence time to 5 minutes and then 3 and 3, then we've got.
It's an even 11.
It's an even 11. And I'm just thinking about how we go about scheduling this in a way that respects the time of the public and also your time, so we don't have dead space.
In 10 minutes, maybe we just,
I think maybe with the 10-minute and the 15-minute blocks and
Yeah.
the written comments in between, we can manage that fairly well.
Yeah, and if I may include, most of the appeals that are going to actually have an appointment, I feel like we have good, reliable data. So mine is going to be in either 1 or 5 sheets of paper that should be pretty clear of why we haven't made a reduction on the valuation already. So, and during the board deliberation, 3 to 5 minutes, I think that there can be some back and forth, questioning. So my time will probably be pretty brief on most of them, unless it's a very complex situation that we're trying to explain and show the various different things that can occur, or why someone may or may not be understanding or liking the way it's done.
Well, I appreciate all the time and effort we all do that you and your staff have put into not only working with the public, but setting up a process that's going to work well for everyone. So we will look forward to that opportunity to spend some time looking at this next week.
Okay, so we'll plan on 10 and 15-minute appointments, depending on the number of parcels?
Yep.
Okay, then I don't think there was really anything else. I mean, I just was going to give you an update. You know, we had the 530 appeals. I've been tracking the views on YouTube of the video that we've been kind of instructing people to go and watch. Half of those videos, right now, the video has 225 views. That's the one that explains the valuation notices. The homestead is a different video specific to homestead exclusion, 66 views. But half of those views came in the first week of when the valuation notices came out. By May 2nd, we were up to 103 views. So about half in the first week. And, you know, with the 500 people that we talked to, I think 99% of them were instructed to go watch that video, either through an email or on the phone. So I think that really helped. I know a lot of other counties jumped on board and started doing videos like that where, you know, there's going to be a lot of people with concerns. Let's put a single message out there for everyone, and they can watch it as many times as they need to understand it. Property taxes are really complex, and people don't understand how they work always. So we did our best. I can't remember if there was one other item so one other thing I wanted to talk about ahead of the meeting is the Department of Revenue in their recommendations talks about hearing all appeals first and then going back and making a decision. I've seen it done both ways, and I truly feel like doing the motions, especially when there's a taxpayer appealing in person, is making that motion after their appeal, so we don't have to go back and refresh memories and, you know, those types of things. When we're setting these appointments, we would be sending the taxpayers away without knowing what the decision was. So that's my recommendation. Obviously, the board chair can come up. It's the board's meeting, so the board can decide how they want to proceed with that. And then lastly, the notifying taxpayers, we always send out a letter whether or not there was a change, letting them know what the board decided. So that's all I have.
All right, well, thank you so much. It seems reasonable to take a vote on that immediately after having the information presented and with the taxpayer there. But I do appreciate you following up with a letter. It's nice to have it in person and in print.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right.
Well, thank you so much,
Yep.
Assessor.
Thanks, you guys. We'll see you guys.
Thank you.
Auditor Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first item is setting a public hearing to amend the tax abatement resolution. The intention of this was to keep this to one meeting, to do this step, and then to potentially approve a development agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just gotten a response. We've really gotten the two attorneys, the one for Rob Dieter and Bob Tofte for ours, both viewing and commenting on the draft, and just got a response back from Rob's attorney with some substantial changes. So I'd like to postpone this to the 28th and then set it for the first meeting in July. I just talked to Bob. I don't think there's a realistic sense that we'll have, we'll be ready with a development agreement for the 28th, and we still would like to do it all at one time if possible. So. The next item is the first half fiscal disparity payment. This is usually routine. It doesn't come to the board because this gets set. It's in statute. We do it every year. Make the payment this year because, as you're aware from back during Truth and Taxation, that the calculation the statutory calculation, doesn't work as designed. And so we had many unique taxing areas that had more than 100% by calculation that would be taxed at the fiscal disparity area-wide rate. The general intention of the statute is that 40% is, but the way it works is it varies anywhere from, you'll see teens to 50 to, lots of but relatively small variations compared to what happened this last year because of the change in the number of commercial properties. And this happened primarily in Lake and Cook County. So, but the formula itself then pushes some areas beyond 100%, which is illogical in a sense, but the statute also limits it, their payment to 100%. So, long story short, Cook County will collect roughly $158,000 less than we will collect from commercial taxpayers because their payment is limited, but ours is not as a county. So we're gonna pay more, as is Lake County. So this is the first half payment. We've asked our legislators to look at this. It's very unusual to look at ways to maybe compensate the two counties that are hit so hard, maybe to compensate some of the commercial taxpayers who got hit not by the 100% issue, but just by the huge swing due to this change in classification that this formula uses. And the legislature has had at least one proposed bill to help the individual taxpayers, but nothing's been approved. So we're waiting on a possible special session to see if even that would be approved, and maybe someone could still propose something for the two counties. So that's what's sitting out here waiting on this. This is the first half payment. You might choose to make the first half payment. You might say, well, we're going to be short. We're not going to collect the money that it says we're to collect and pay. And we could short our payment by the $158,000, which is an estimate, or half of that, or we could pay the first half now, see what happens with a special session, and put off our ultimate decision until the October second half payment. Is that long enough? Too long?
To me, it makes sense to look at paying the first half of this amount at this time and see if the legislature pulls through with something in a special session. Obviously, that's an unknown, but then down the line, we deal with that. Other commissioners, your
Well,
thoughts?
and we normally get billed on, we're paying half as required.
Yes, the first half,
Yeah.
the bill comes in the first part of June, the second will come.
And we know we're
middle
on
of
the hook for
October.
$158,000.
So we're not being
additional.
delinquent if we pay now
No.
our half.
No.
We don't need to pay the
No,
whole
that's
amount
normal.
right now.
That's what's required. It's in the statute. You pay half
Yeah.
at this point and half later.
I guess I'm in the same position is since no one seems to know whether there's going to be a special session. And we can't bet on that right now. And we owe this until the process is amended. This is what is calculated and we're owed. So none of us are happy that this has occurred or that it's going to come out of the general fund. But I don't see any other, unless we're going to take and appeal the entire thing, and try to get some kind of a change. I think, we're going to end up paying it. But I'm in agreement with the chair that if we're making our first half, let's make the first half including the half of this.
Commissioner Mills, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What are the consequences of Matt?
We don't know. The whole fiscal disparities law was appealed almost immediately or shortly after it went into effect because it's very complicated. law, and it's hard to know the ultimate fairness of it. Itasca County, someone brought forth a lawsuit then. It wasn't successful. No one's challenged it since. Our board has, so let's say, challenged it to our legislators when they've visited from time to time, since 1995 when this went into effect. And the answer has always been from the legislature that in their minds it's tied to our being in the taconite district and all the benefits of being in a taconite district. And since this has been in effect, you can consider them really of the same, essentially. And if you're here for one, you're here for both. And we benefit greatly from taconite revenue, whether it's production tax, taconite credit, grants from my RRRB, et cetera. So we don't know what the reaction would be. I don't know what the reaction would be. St. Louis County is the administrative auditor, so they will be forced to make a decision if we don't pay the full amount, because they've indicated to all the various entities through the process of how much they're expecting to get, which they say they put into their budgets. So either individual entities, meaning towns, cities, that expected it will be short, or someone else in the district, maybe the administrative auditor will make up the difference and then take some action. But what that is, I have not really a clue. It hasn't come up before. First of its kind, and that's one of the actions we dearly love our legislators to take, is to take a hard look at how the law is written, at the very least to try to prevent something like this from happening again. If there was a swing, because that's what triggered it, was a large swing in commercial values. We've seen it in small districts before. We saw it in Schroeder when there was a change in the utility down there, but it's been very small, kind of isolated, but not across, entire counties, like it hit 2 counties here. And it would be, I think, potentially very beneficial to look at least amending that statute in some way to prevent or soften an effect like this again, at the very least.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Brady. And so Duluth is not in the fiscal disparities area, right?
Much of the commercial district is not.
And is that area get benefit from the mining credits, or is that also excluded from those benefits?
I don't know that specifically, but I would expect that they're part of St. Louis County, part of the taconite area.
And
I don't know what went into that decision.
Do you know what Lake County is doing?
They've indicated to me through the auditor's office that they're going to make the full payment.
And, I'd like to be in compliance. I'm just wondering what will get more attention from the legislature if we want movement.
Yeah.
Being out of compliance, because then you're kind of the bad guy. But if you are in compliance, it may not get as much attention. So I just don't know without further state communications the best way to navigate that. And I hear what you're saying about making the first payment. We're on the hook for that.
Doing the first payment, paying half of it might give us an opportunity to do some research and talk to some of our legislators again about this issue.
And they've recognized the issue. They expected to do something. They've also recognized the cause of it was that year delay in the classification. If they would have just done that right away, then we wouldn't have had this great a swing. So,
Madam Chair?
Attorney Higgins.
Thank you. I think that there's a lot to consider here. I don't have a short answer for you, like a legal short answer for you, and I'd prefer to, maybe talk to James and Brady about it offline, about my thoughts. But I support the proposal that we pay this first half in general, without making a commitment as to what we do for the second half yet. Buy ourselves some time. And then my non-legal commentary, for what it's worth, is that I wonder if the commercial property owners in Cook County who have had to pay such high amounts would join the county in an appeal to the legislators to help fix the law. And I also wonder about working with the other counties who would maybe, it's also complicated, it's hard to even talk about it in a simplified fashion, but I think a swing in this way, the way it's happened recently for us, is painful to Cook County residents, but a swing in the other way could be painful to whichever body is collecting all of these funds and benefiting from it. So if you could design language that would protect kind of both ends of that spectrum, that might be what's most agreeable to the most parties, and that we could get the legislature on board with.
That's a good point. In
Most easily.
this case, it was Lake and Cook, because what was affected was this housing market. The tourist housing market, and these two counties are so dependent on that it had an outsized effect on these two. In other counties, it might be the utility valuations for some reason have a huge swing. And I mean, for all I know, some of them have had that effect, and we haven't noticed it, and maybe it hasn't been countywide to this effect, but they may be subject to this kind of problem in the future themselves.
I just want to point out that the chamber is working
Yeah.
on this
Okay,
too.
good.
So the business community is in the loop and very proactive with,
Good.
I'm very disappointed that the bill didn't
Yeah.
find its way to the finish line
Yeah.
for the business owners.
Other questions, comments?
I'd make a motion to approve the half payment, apparently from the general fund.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Mills.
Point of order, there's a motion on the
sorry. So this payment's going to come from the tax fund, because we are collecting these funds, and we will collect enough for a half payment for sure. So we don't need a decision on this for this half payment. Potentially, if it's over this, the stated amount, the 158,000, we'll be short, then we'll have to make the decision on the general fund. So.
Understood. Okay.
Thank you for
Motion
clarifying.
made, I guess.
Yeah, I retract my motion.
So I would recommend the motion just to make the payment from the tax fund as shown, the half payment.
I'll make that motion.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Spellison. Is there a support?
Can we include a letter or saying this is paid under protest?
For the first half?
Yeah. Because the first half is too high, right?
Like, we're not acknowledging that this is 50% of our responsibility.
Would you like to make that amendment?
Yes.
I don't know that you need a change we're just, whether we're paying it or not, whether we
Well,
write a letter.
we'll do them separately.
All right.
I'll
So
support.
first, we have the motion to pay half
Yep.
I'll support.
and a support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now,
If we want a letter, I'm good with that.
I'm just thinking that maybe we should send it to St. Louis County and to our legislator and to our governor, who didn't do their jobs, and say, you should have fixed this, and we're protesting this.
I think to Lake County too.
Yeah.
Just to keep everyone in the loop who's, or is there like a central,
Just,
is it just the legislature that manages this? I mean, St. Louis County is the,
They're the administrative auditor, and it could be any auditor of any of the 7 counties, but they're the largest, best able to handle this, so they've been the administrative.
so we might want to send it to all of the counties that are in the district.
so everybody knows, that's a very good idea.
So,
And I'm not writing the letter, so I don't know.
so are you asking me to write the letter on behalf?
No.
You have better wordsmithing skills.
Or staff.
Yeah.
All right,
I was going to say Brady and I could take that.
and I would be happy to help, so. All right, we will. So do we have a motion to write a letter on behalf of the Cook County Board of Commissioners? The 3 of us will work on that.
Thank you. Yes, I will make that motion.
Support.
Thank you. We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Yep.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. On to the revolving loan fund.
On a happier note, so you've seen this loan request
Before, yes.
before, or at least from the same parties. So Adam and Mike hire you to purchase a lot in the BDA for space for their office and to house their equipment for their trail designing business. It's outgrown their city lot. So this came several months ago, I think in September. It was approved, but our guidelines say if they haven't taken the money in 180 days, they have to come back and make another request in case there's been substantial changes. They were delayed because they couldn't get the deal done on the BDA lot until it was too late to start construction. So, and in the meantime, there's been a lot of inflation, you might have noticed. So they're asking for an additional $10,000, which they then also put up an additional 20 to keep us at 1/3, and the costs. It's matching their projected costs. So it's the same loan with a higher amount with the same terms. So, and that's for approval. The committee listened to this and gave their approval and recommend approval to you.
All right. Are there any questions for Auditor Powers? Any remarks, Commissioner Hawkins, you want to make? I know you attended the meeting.
Oh, the revolving loan fund.
Yeah.
Really, the committee decided this made sense.
Okay.
And no questions.
All right.
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you much, Commissioner Swallison. We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Administrator Yorkie.
All right, only one action item for you all today, and that is to approve sponsorship of the application on the part of the Cook County Housing and Redevelopment Authority for membership in the Minnesota Counties Insurance or Intergovernmental Trust. The sponsorship would enable the HRA to become members and to access liability insurance through MCIT, which it needs to have, especially as it gets closer to potentially making decisions about finances and supporting projects. I don't see that being an immediate need, but it will come up, hopefully before too long. So the HRA board members just want to be prepared for that, and so this would be a motion to support sponsorship of the application.
Any questions for Administrator Yorkie?
And I did not mention that there's no cost to the county, so that's important.
All right. So with that, any questions, concerns?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Smallison. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Just a few other things to note today. I am having a meeting this afternoon with Chad Rickel from CRBPS to discuss a kickoff plan for the CIP. That's the Capital Improvement Plan update. And we're expecting that CRBPS will actually be able to start doing site visits yet this month. And so for folks who are just tuning in, aren't familiar with previous discussions about this, we have contracted with a firm to assist us in assessing all of our key buildings and helping us update a plan for making investments in those buildings to catch up on maintenance and also to assess space needs to see if there may be a need for future capital projects. The process that we went through several years ago prior to my arrival here resulted in the establishment of a CIP. The cornerstone of that plan was an expansion of the jail, which was controversial and ultimately ended up not happening. And so we're really 4 or 5 years down the road from that work. And there's a need to update that plan. And one thing that we've really emphasized in seeking a consultant is we want to get away from what we've historically done, which is to try to do things on the cheap as much as possible up front. And this is not about wasting taxpayer dollars. It's really about taking a long-term perspective to make sure that we are minimizing long-term costs for the county. And so in order to do that, you have to take a long view. You can't just do the cheapest thing today and expect that your costs in the future are going to be low. And the example I always cite is the single pane windows that were installed in this addition to the courthouse back in 1998. That was done as a cost-saving measure, and I would argue that over time it ultimately ended up costing the county a lot more having single pane windows than it would have to just buy the more expensive windows up front. And so we need to do that kind of cost analysis to make sure that we're making the smartest decisions for the taxpayers of Cook County. And so I'm very excited to get that work underway. I think we have a first-rate consultant working with us. CRBPS has done work on the Y, did a great job upgrading that building for us and addressing some real performance issues that we were experiencing with that. So eager to get that underway, and we'll be having further conversations with our building committee as well about how that's going to move forward. So. Another thing I wanted to mention, per county HR policies, when we do temporary hires, they don't require board approval, but they do, we are required to notify you that we're making a temporary hire. I was approached recently by the maintenance department. They are having a lot of trouble keeping up with mowing this summer. It's been wet. There's been, the grass has really been growing. They've requested a 2-time-a-week temporary hire through the end of summer to assist with mowing and other projects. And so I have agreed to do that. It is not going to exceed the personnel budget for this year. The total cost of that temporary hire will be about just shy of $3,600 over the course of summer. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we are moving forward on our classification and compensation study. We are at a point, we had our last meeting with our consultant last week, and we're still trying to decide what factors we're going to use and how to weight those factors in selecting comparables for the study. And the last meeting was kind of, there's a lot to dig into, right? There are a lot of different ways you can slice and dice this. And so we decided that we probably need to have a meeting without the consultant to kind of have more internal discussion about, hey, what are our priorities? How do we want to weight these different factors in selecting our comparables? And so that's where we are right now, and we're going to have a meeting next week, just the staff who are part of that steering committee, to complete that discussion so that the next time we meet with the consultant, we'll have a clearer course of action. So, and I just want to say again, I really appreciate the involvement of everybody who's part of that working group. Everybody's participating. The bargaining units, the supervisors, the directors and Commissioner Mills representing the board. Really important to have that kind of multi-level perspective in this work. So really, really happy about how that's moving along. Again, our expectation is that this work will be completed around late summer, early fall. So, and as we get more information about that, we'll share updates on it.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
I just
Commissioner
also
Mills.
wanted to thank Administrator Yorkie for his leadership and his willingness to listen to staff and listen to everybody and really, really hear people's concerns. I think that's extremely valuable, and it makes a big difference in how we operate and just how we appreciate staff. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I appreciate that comment, and I agree. I mean, having everybody involved in the process, none of us is as smart as all of us are together. And that's just a basic truth. And so listening to all the voices and understanding where people are coming from, and then trying to take those perspectives into account is vitally important. So that's pretty much what I have for this week.
All right, thank you. All right, other commissioners, any meeting updates or concerns? Commissioner Mills.
I just wanted to let in case the board is not aware of that WTIP project, that one small step, those conversations, I think, I haven't signed up yet, I intend to, but I would encourage all of us to. What a wonderful opportunity for community building and community discussion. And I attended a board retreat for the YMCA and had a speaker there who was working on just kind of board development and was talking about racism and equity, and just talking about how, in his opinion, the most effective way is to have conversations, just to talk with people. And that's exactly what this project is doing. And so for our work with the Racial Equity Work Group, this is a really great, and this is outside of that, but I think it really works well with that. And that's just something I think we could all benefit from. And if we could recommend people that we know in the community that have potentially radical views to be involved in that too. I think it's very important that we have very diverse views, and I know our community does have very diverse views. So just, think of people who would fall, who it's your impression that they might fall into that. Not just them, but I think it's especially helpful to bring in people who might be on the outskirts of the conversations that we have. So.
And WTIP was only one of 6 stations, or I should say one of only 6 stations, nationally selected by StoryCorps to participate in this project. So that is a huge coup for this community.
Very exciting. Very exciting. Other updates? I just wanted to share, I had an opportunity to visit with Representative Eklund 2 weekends in a row. He came to Cook County, and we actually gave him a little tour of some of our flood-damaged areas. He looked at some of the improvements in the road, and a shout out to our highway department for putting together a phenomenal packet of photographs, videos, spreadsheet information, costs, so that he would have all of that to put together with other counties who are experiencing flooding as well. But he's really looking out for us, and appreciated the opportunity to meet with him. And in addition to working on highways, Commissioner Swallowson and I got to go to Kimball Lake with him last weekend for the Take a Kid fishing event. And so we have a couple of photographs that we just wanted to share with you for that event, but our Soil and Water Conservation District put this on. Amanda Weberg was there with aquatic invasive species, and it was just a really great opportunity to provide kids with a chance to go fishing. A lot of nice rainbow trout, and we had a lot of fun. Commissioner work isn't always challenging and tedious, but sometimes we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs because I was tangled up in my bug gear. Couldn't get it off for the photographs, so.
I was going to ask which of you is the kid?
Well, just wait. I believe Commissioner Svallison is the kid in this picture, but if we go to the next picture, there are some kids with Representative Eklund going down to the landing there, and it was just really nice, and it was particularly nice down at the landing because there weren't many black flies. Once you got out on the water, and maybe Commissioner Swallison, you want to share what happened out on the water?
Well, yeah, it was very nice out on the water and spending time out there. Did a little fishing after the event. Very nice lake, and but I did really appreciate Representative Eklund showing up and spending the time there and interfacing with the folks and the kids. Just a great outing all around, and we certainly did feed the black fly population up around Kimball
We
Lake.
gave blood.
When you caught your first rainbow?
I did catch my first rainbow trout, and very exciting for me.
All right. Any other updates? All right, well, if not, we have some meetings coming up this Friday, Arrowhead Regional Corrections, right here in this room at 10 a.m. We have a couple commissioners that will be here. And then next week, Board of Appeals and Equalization, the 23rd and the 24th, and there will be lots of appointments scheduled, so we'll look forward to that event. We have our lodging tax comparison, which is our correspondence, and then some exciting recognition of staff. Andrew Beavers in the assessor's office for 1 year. I'm sure right now it feels like about 10 years. But we want to thank him for his service. Scott Benoken from the Highway Department, 14 years. Dave Eckel, maintenance, 44 years.
Go Dave.
Amazing. Rachel Espy in the assessor's office, 8 years. Isabella Sheenan in PHHS for 3 years. Justin Thompson with the Highway Department for 4 years. And a few milestone anniversaries, Raquel Berg, Reed Mayer, and Alyssa Smith in PHHS, all with 5 years. So very good work. And one new hire, Melissa Wickwire, from here in the community as our new PHHS Executive Administrative Assistant. So we welcome her.
It's very exciting.
And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Svallison. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.